Welcome to Crossroads podcast, real conversations about mental health in the MENA region. I'm Reece Lavender, clinical psychologist practicing at Mahdi Psychology Center in Cairo and in Dubai. In each episode, I sit down with professionals to discuss how culture, care, and psychology intersect in our daily lives. Whether you're a parent, student, doctor, or just curious, these conversations are for you. Gini Marshall, welcome to Crossroads, a conversation about the interaction between culture and psychology. Gini, you are a counsellor at a top British international school in Cairo. Previously, you were a social worker in the UK before coming to this country. I'd really like to hear, what your daily work is like. What do you see most in the young people that you serve?
So it's very different to the fast-paced frontline social work world in the UK. And thankfully, it brings me a lot closer to direct work with young people at a much slower, more measured pace. There are times when we're dealing with crisis in the school, it happens. But thankfully, those are few and far between, especially compared to social work. And a normal day would be having one-to-one sessions with young people across the school from primary through to secondary, so up to 18.
Across the school?
Yeah. Though the majority of my work is with the older teens and sometimes with adult staff members as well, who can come and present with any kind of problem that they'd like to talk about. Without an appointment, but I do have scheduled sessions with young people, and that's a variety of different reasons that they get referred. They can self-refer, their teachers can refer, their parents can refer.
What presentations do you see most of in Egypt?
I would say anxiety, exam anxiety, academic anxiety, pressure from home. And sometimes the pressure from home is so ingrained in the culture that they don't even need that much pressure from home. They put it on themselves. It's unspoken.
What might that look like? Where we're not from this part of the world.
That they really do have to do well in school to have a better future, to be able to get a job, to be able to go to university, to be able to leave the country, to keep up with the academic standards within their families, to do as well as their cousin, their brother, their neighbour. So a lot of pressure and stress. Other issues we might see, disordered eating, body image issues, self-harm is quite common as well. A lot of issues with social media. That could be friendship issues, or it could be kind of how it plays out online, how people feel about themselves.
Is there, do you notice an issue with cyberbullying, for example, that is quite prevalent in the collective West? Do you come across that?
I mean, it definitely, of course, it exists, but I don't think it's something that I encounter a lot of. What I would more encounter would be students feeling rejection sensitive when everything they do is online. So they might find by looking at their Instagram or their Snapchat streaks that there was a gathering that they weren't invited to that might upset their psyche, a party, something going on, or they might go out with a friend and then be confronted by another friend who will say, "Oh, you went out without me," and the stresses around that are really real for young people. We deal with quite a lot of that.
What kind of advice to give the young people that you serve, with that rejection?
That would usually be around like boundaries. You don't have to be invited to everything, and you don't have to invite everyone else to things as well. And kind of helping them to feel confident in just living their life and being inclusive of other people, but also knowing that it's okay to do things and not invite everybody.
And I guess communicating those boundaries too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Which, is something that many in this part of the world struggle with, the idea of setting a boundary as well,
Yeah.
So Gini, I've known you for a few years, and we've spoken about the experience of anxiety in youth today, and you gave me a really lovely insight into how you discuss that with young people. Would you be able to share that with me again? For example, you were telling me that this is not just, necessarily a panic attack, but maybe it's how it feels right now.
Yeah, part of my work in helping young people to regulate their emotions is actually understanding what things constitute just problems as a normal side effect of living, and what might be considered something more like anxiety or depression, and helping young people sort of realise that life does have ups and downs, and you have to fall in love with the ups as well as the downs, and this helps us build our resilience. And if you fall a few times and you get back up, you realise that the path to success just, involves falling here and there. And, a lot of young people that I work with look up to people online like Stephen Bartlett and these other sort of CEO, is it called Diary of a CEO, the podcast, and where they've failed at loads of things in life before they got up and sort of carried on and did amazing things. So it's just and problems are a normal side effect of living. And if we over pathologize and make social problems individual, then we fail to see that we live in a world where everyone would have anxiety about something. That would be really normal, the state of the economy, the job market, social pressures, loneliness in a world where we're surrounded by people.
And so connected, right? That connectivity.
So connected, yeah.
The war, I think, is something you mentioned also.
Yeah, definitely. And when we see these as a part of life, then we don't start thinking of it as I'm anxious, this is my anxiety, but rather just a part of living, and how do we sort of navigate through that.
And I really like something that I heard you say, and that is to normalize their worry, right? There's a real reason for them to be worried about something, with everything that they're exposed to.
Yeah. And they have a lot of conversations with their parents that will be, kind of maybe more like lectures about doing well. You've got to do well. You've got to get good grades. You won't get a job if you don't. I mean, but in this part of the world, people do go to university. They do get the qualifications, and then there isn't the jobs for them. And what does that feel like, to know that you might have to work your socks off to get through university, and then there isn't those jobs out there for you, there isn't that salary? What does success look like in that kind of environment?
And so working at, one of Cairo's top international schools, how do you communicate and navigate that with the young people?
I try and focus on the journey rather than the destination, because if you do fantastic in all your exams and get all A stars, but your mental health is not good, then your academic success is meaningless if you haven't got good mental health.
That's so important.
Yeah. So and I think that we're always so focused on the outcome rather than what you pick up along the way. And I say to students, if you got to the end of your exams and you flunked them, does that mean that everything you'd learned in your 16-year academic career was a waste of time? No, it wasn't, because you learn all the way along the way.
You've developed,
you've picked up skills. It's not always just about the arrival at the end of the academic journey. it's all along the way.
So as a British person living in Egypt, and you're working as a counsellor, you would have seen a lot of differences in the youth that you worked with in the UK compared to here. How does that experience influence how you work with young people from this part of the world? I mean, you're working with expat children as well, but also with children from the local population.
Yeah, I think it's an entirely different demographic in that I was working in frontline social work, so children who had been harmed or who were at risk of harm. Where in the school that I work at now, universally everybody has access to counselling services, not just those who have been harmed or are at risk of harm. So that's really good that anyone can access that support. The difference is, I would say that we have quite an affluent population in our school that we call third culture kids. So they're growing up with the pressures of what it's like being in Egypt, in this region, within their families, with their religious, cultural stuff, and also exposed to a more British curriculum. And there's a little bit of rub along the way sometimes.
How do you support them with that? Because that is a huge issue for third culture kids to have one foot in two different cultures.
Yeah. I think it's just important to look at the positives in both sides and just give them a safe space to kind of explore that and talk about that, because they can't always have those conversations at home. So many of the children don't have any conversations with their parents at home. They're being raised by nannies or carers, and they're just not having those conversations with their parents.
So what's that like for you, in your work where you do have to have difficult conversations with parents or carers? How do you navigate that?
Well, with some great tact. My social work training comes in handy with that. We have to be very sensitive and mindful of the different cultures, and it's not just Egyptian culture. I think there's over 70 different nationalities represented in our school, so we need to be really culturally competent and mindful when we're having those kind of conversations about academic stress, about pressure on children, about different ways of disciplining children, being culturally normal. It's not an easy conversation, but we try to be mindful and sensitive, but also remembering that, there's a young person at the heart of this, and if we support them, this is to get the best out of them academically, mentally. Some of the conversations I have around mental health are bringing the awareness that, from by the time we're about 5 years old, we know that we should eat our vegetables because we have physical health and we have a relationship with our body that we nurture. And then we start to learn that exercise is good for us and, keeping good physical health. But we don't have those same conversations when it comes to mental health. And I think 1 in 3 people experience a mental health problem in their life, but 3 out of 3 people have a head and a brain and a mental health. So it's really important that we understand the connection between our mental health and our physical health as well, and what we can do to nurture a good mental health. Mental health isn't just something that happens to sick or poorly or dysfunctional people. Everyone has a mental health.
You're absolutely
So
right.
I have those kind of conversations. People don't always agree with me, but it's about the psychoeducation that's around that. If you can plant that seed and then a parent goes home and thinks about it a little bit more, maybe they watch a podcast or listen to something online and think, oh, maybe they had a point.
Yes, you raise a really, really important point. I guess psychoeducation is really important in the work that you're doing, with the parents, but also with the young people. Yeah. I see in my clinical practice, when I'm working with families, there's often a resistance to the family being brought into the picture. It's like here's my child, here's my teen, fix them. But unless there's an organic issue, like ADHD, autism, something like that it usually goes back to the family system, the attachment dynamic. So I see often a resistance, the family being brought into that.
I think the family believe that these things can be sorted out within school, and because we're spending 6-8 hours a day with their children, that's where these things can be resolved rather than the hour or two they spend with their children. But it doesn't really work like that. And all parts of the child's life are influenced and have influence on all other parts of their life. So nothing can be looked at in isolation. You can't change a child's behaviour without looking at what influences it and what they influence.
So, for myself, Gini, as a clinical psychologist, how can I support you in your role? As a counsellor at a large school, what do people like me have to do to support you better?
I don't think that there is a great deal of joint working in this field like we have in the UK. I come from working in a very multidisciplinary kind of organisation where we're working with child and adolescent mental health, with the police, with the health visitors, with schools.
We work as a team, right?
We're all part of the same team, and the social worker kind of coordinates that. Where here, everyone kind of works in silos.
Yes.
We do have psychologists that come into the school and do assessments if we feel that the issues we're seeing in young people become medical, let's say. They're not things that could be sort of supported to achieve great change within school. And we will still support young people, but sometimes I explain to parents, if your child is self-harming, they're suicidal, they have body image issues that's resulting in anorexia, bulimia, these have become medical problems. And we need to treat them as such. And if your child was hit by a car and their leg was hanging off, that would be seen as an emergency and they would go to a doctor. If your child wants to end their life, we should consider that an emergency and they should go to a doctor. And we'll continue to support them, but it becomes, too severe for us to manage without that kind of high-level intervention that doctors can bring to the situation. So we would be referring to you and hoping that the family were able to access that without any of their own cultural stuff getting in the way.
Some resistance maybe, or to
yeah.
something being exposed maybe. And so what I hear is then communication, right? Working as a team for the best outcome for the young person is really crucial. I think it's something that you and I have done together where, we've had to, communicate for, and to also advocate for the young person. So even though we tend to work in silos in this country, in private practice, that it's really important that we work together, that you have good communication with the therapist or the clinician that you're referring to. Yeah. And, there are things that you know more than I do about that young person as well. When you're spending so much time with them in the school setting, you know more about the family too, very often.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance, but if we can kind of, paint a good picture of mental health services, and a lot of our work relies on the idea that academic success is of the most importance to a lot of parents, and reminding them that without mental health, academic success is meaningless. So if we can support them with the mental health, they'll have greater access to education, because unhappy kids can't learn in the same way. They can't access the education that's there.
How do you promote the importance of mental health in your school?
Oh, in lots of ways we support Mental Health Week. I have a student mentoring program where I train the students to support younger students that might be struggling with social issues in the school. And we have just a culture where it's okay to come and talk to the counsellor at any time. We have drop-ins twice a day. We have scheduled appointments with young people, and it's just a part of the school culture. I do see as well that young people are quite chronically online these days, and they often come to me with their own TikTok diagnosis, and that can be difficult to
Disentangle,
yeah, because they've already decided, and that's really unhelpful, because then if they say, oh, I'm anxious and I can't do PE, then I say to them, well, you can't come here, and this isn't a way of getting out of PE. I'll help you get to PE. I'll help you enjoy PE. I'll help you like PE again, but it's not my job to help you avoid the things that you're anxious about. That's not helpful. Because that's the first thing they come and say, Miss, I'm too anxious for PE. You've got to get me out of PE. Can I come during PE? You can come, but you can't come during PE. That's not how I help you face up to the things that are difficult. You can do hard things.
So, Gini, communicating with parents, I guess, is an important part of your work.
You probably communicate with parents a lot more than me, because a part of the British system with regards to counselling is that young people don't have to have their parents' permission to come to counselling. And most of them will expressly say that they don't want their parents to know. Sometimes I'll say, how can we affect change if they don't know? And it's my job to kind of sell the idea that we're going to get parents on board, and it does happen. But I would assume that you have more one-to-one conversations with parents than I do.
Yes, it is true that, I guess parents from this part of the world expect to know everything that's going on in session, in therapy. Where I'm licensed to practice, so Canada and Australia, young people are emancipated therapeutically at 15. But obviously I provide a confidential space, for any age that they come, and I usually only see young people 13 and up, in addition to the adults that I see. So, I provide obviously I have to provide a confidential space for the young people, but the only time that I can break confidentiality is if I'm concerned for the safety of the young person or someone else. And so that's something that I really make clear when I first see a young person, or even their parents, that what we talk about is confidential. And that would be important in the conversations you're having with young people too.
And sometimes parents will say, can I come in and talk to you? And I'll say to them on the telephone, of course you can come in and talk to me, but I'm going to be limited to what I can say to you, because this helps preserve the therapeutic relationship that I have with this young person. And I'm happy to receive information from you and use that to help guide my work. But what they say to me is confidential, unless they say someone's hurting them, they're going to hurt themselves, or they're going to hurt somebody else. And then that comes under safeguarding, and we can't keep that confidential. Otherwise, we need to preserve that relationship, because that is that safe space for them.
Yeah. And it's paramount, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Gini, you work with young people, from primary to secondary, but mostly with adolescents. Statistically, depression is one of the major mental health conditions affecting young people globally. What message would you have to parents, people listening today, even young people that might find this, this conversation? What would you say to them about getting help or speaking up about how they're feeling?
Yeah, I think that the stigma around seeking support with mental health is shifting slowly in some regions more than others. but that there is support out there. There shouldn't be shame attached to that. Like I said earlier, we all have physical health, therefore we all have mental health, and there is support out there, some very good quality support out there in the region. And it isn't normal to be feeling the type of feelings associated with depression, low mood, lethargy, affected sleep, appetite changes, low mood, intrusive thoughts. This is not normal. And more often than not, what parents will say to their young people is, this is perfectly normal. I was like this when I was young. This is the life. This is what we have. I didn't have a therapist when I was young. I didn't have a counsellor when I was young. You have everything in life. You have money, you have school, you have this, you have that. And there's a get on with it kind of attitude. And, it doesn't have to be that way. There are avenues of support out there that we shouldn't feel ashamed about.
Beautiful. Gini Marshall, thank you very much for joining me on Crossroads.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you again soon.
Okay, thank you.